deflection.
These guys are hungry for more. They want to build a dynasty here.
Believe in each other. Fly around. Let's find a way to win.
And he's going to be hit. Chris Jones got him in a bear hug. Pacheco blasts into the end zone at the 10-5, length to the end zone. Touchdown.
The Chiefs were just about perfect in all three phases last week en route to a dominant victory. And now back on top of the AFC West, Kansas City returns to the national stage with a primetime clash against the New York Jets. We are 2 hours from kickoff. You've waited all week for this very moment. It's finally here. It is time for football in Chiefs Kingdom. Let's do this. My name is Matt McMullen, joined by voice of the Chiefs, Mitch Holthus. This is Field Pass, presented by StorageMart. And Mitch, from 41 offensive points to pitching a first-half shutout against Chicago last week, it was a complete team victory for Kansas City last week.
Yeah, it was awesome that all three phases could take a bite out of that one, including Washington's 23-yard punt return and the 55-yard punt that took a right turn out of bounds at the 3 by Tommy Townsend. It's also big tonight. This is the only place in the AFC that Patrick Mahomes has not been to or started. He was here watching in 2017, but of the 16 places he could be in the AFC, this is the last one he will walk onto the field for to be a starter, so it's a big night.
Well, we'll talk about Patrick here in a moment. I want to talk about the overall offensive efficiency we saw last week, though, because it was really encouraging, I think. We talked about it on Field Pass last week before the game, that we saw good signs from the offense in the first 2 weeks of the season. They were moving the football when they weren't beating themselves, right, with things like penalties, turnovers. Well, they avoided all of that in the first half last week, and we saw the results.
And we saw him run the ball, and that was good. And we saw all three running backs get involved in the game, which was also good. But we also saw the young receivers, too, step up and make some plays, knowing what routes to run when. A lot of these are option routes, and I know Chicago played a lot of zone. But the young receivers, I thought, took a step forward in playing with Patrick and recognizing defenses.
Well, how about Patrick last week? Just incredible, like usual. He completed 24 of 33 passes for 272 yards, 3 touchdowns. No big deal. Just another day at the office for the best quarterback in the NFL. It was his 37th career game with at least 3 touchdown passes, easily the most in the NFL since 2018 by a whopping 10 games over second place. And for some more context, he's now thrown for at least 3 touchdowns in 45% of his career games. Amazing stuff.
And he's using everybody, right? You and I talked about it all week long and really talked about it since last year. The fact that if you're an eligible pass catcher, you're on the radar. And they honestly are way ahead of the league in that regard.
Well, you mentioned the running game a bit earlier as well. We always talk about the passing game, and for good reason, but let's give the rushing attack from last week some love between Jerick McKinnon, Isaiah Pacheco, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. At one point in the first half last week, Isaiah Pacheco was averaging over 7 yards per carry. It's amazing what this running game can do and how it can make this offense even more dynamic when it's working.
And getting chunk plays out of the run game. Staying ahead of the chains, but they got a chunk play from Pacheco. Rashee Rice made an awesome block. But to get effective big plays out of the running game just makes the passing game that much more effective. And if they get that balance rolling, they're hard to stop, sometimes almost impossible to stop.
There are a lot of Chiefs fans here already. If you hear lots of yelling and screaming going on watching the guys. There's also a horde of lantern flies that are descending on this area, apparently. They're an invasive species I learned all about 30 minutes ago. If a bug lands on one of us during the show, we're going to try not to freak out. But that's what it is. It's a lantern fly. You're supposed to destroy it if you see one, just FYI.
Well, it kind of bothers me a little bit, right? Because they're a menace to agriculture in this area.
They are. It's actually a big deal.
And so, all throughout the Northeast, this is an issue, and they come from Asia?
Yeah.
Anyway, if you see a lanternfly land on my nose, then you know what it is.
You know what it is, or crawling across the lids.
It's somewhat concerning me. They were all over the hotel, too.
Yeah, they're everywhere. Anyway, back to football. Both the running game and the passing game were so good last week, and they combined to have the Chiefs go a perfect 5 for 5 in the red zone. Continue what's been a great trend for Kansas City in the red zone over the last 2 weeks. The Chiefs are 7 for 9 in their last 9 red zone opportunities. That's a big deal.
Yeah, those numbers are zooming up there. After and third downs, trying to get there. It's moving up there, but the red zone, particularly against some decent red zone defensive teams, and we'll get into it tonight, that's the main thing that the Jets do defensively. But to be that good in the red zone, and it's no coincidence that Jerick McKinnon got into the end zone. Go back to what we were saying, everybody gets involved. And in the red zone, Matt, you and I talked about it, even on defending the kingdom. You have to defend the whole width of the field because it becomes, in the red zone, arena football. You can't run 60-yard vertical routes. So I have to attack pylon to pylon, and the Chiefs do that. When they're on fire, they do it as good as anybody in the league.
I believe Jerick McKinnon had the second most red zone touchdowns of any player in the NFL last season with 7, behind only Travis Kelce. Hopefully a few more for Jerick here tonight. I do want to ask you about this Jets defense, though. It's obviously the strength of this team. What stands out to you about this Jets defense?
I think it's one of the top 4 or 5 secondaries the Chiefs will face all season long. Sauce Gardner, last year's Defensive Rookie of the Year, aggressive, tough, athletic, but then there's others. Jordan Whitehead, we saw him in Super Bowl 55. You saw him in Week 1, torment Josh Allen. And then K-Stater, DJ Reed has been really good. He's flourishing in this defense. He had been with Robert Saleh in San Francisco, but now he's a starter. And I think working with Sauce Gardner, this is a really good secondary group that will test the Chiefs' young receivers.
Yeah, they have playmakers everywhere. I mentioned the Chiefs' red zone success earlier, though, as did you. And that's important because if you look at the raw numbers for this Jets defense, kind of paints an interesting picture. These guys ranked 22nd on third down in the NFL this season at 44%. They're 20th in net yards allowed per game at 351.2. They're 19th in total first downs allowed at 62. And they've allowed the second most 10-play drives in the league this season. Why has none of that mattered? It's the number 5 red zone defense in the NFL this year. They've only allowed 3 touchdowns on 8 red zone opportunities. Something has to give here tonight between the Chiefs' red zone offense and this great Jets red zone defense.
The other thing that's kind of weird about this team, and I think it ties into that a bit, remember 2 years ago when the Chiefs were getting pressures but couldn't get sacks? These guys are top 8 in the league, the Jets, in getting pressures, but they only have 6 sacks. Conversely, the Chiefs are in the bottom third of the league in pressure rate, but they're getting 8 sacks. So it's a matter of handling that, especially in the red zone. Keep manageable down and distance, even when you get down in the arena football area.
And like you mentioned, this Jets defense is very talented. They've been very close numerous times to turning those pressures into sacks. So it'll be a challenge here tonight for the Chiefs offense. I want to talk about this Jets offense briefly, though, because they've struggled this season. That's just a reality. Of course, Aaron Rodgers went down with a torn Achilles just 4 snaps into his Jets career. Very unfortunate. Never want that to happen. And since then, this is the number 32 scoring offense in the NFL.
I'm getting rid of one of these lantern flies right there.
I told you, they're everywhere.
Oh, man, eating my flesh. What'd you ask me?
Jets offense and their struggles this year.
Yeah, I mean, that you get. So Zach Wilson, he's rated 33rd or 34th in the league, and there's only 32 starting quarterbacks. But they are capable of being very dangerous. If you watch the 68-yard touchdown pass to Garrett Wilson against the Dallas Cowboys, Wilson has talent. He's got throwing talent. That's why when they evaluated him, they took him 2nd overall in the draft behind Trevor Lawrence in 2021. So don't think they're just garbage here. And then you Wichita fans, Wichita Northwest, the graduate Breece Hall is a very good runner. If he wouldn't have torn his ACL in Week 7 last year, he was on his way to maybe one of the best years ever by an NFL running back in their rookie season. So there's weapons on this Jets offensive team. You can't sleep on them.
Well, let's talk about Breece Hall a little bit more because he's a major playmaker for this Jets squad. He had 127 rushing yards on just 10 attempts in Week 1 against Buffalo. He was a huge reason they won that game. Now, he hasn't been used as much in the last 2 weeks, but still, I think the number 1 priority for the Chiefs here tonight has to be stopping Breece Hall and forcing Zach Wilson to throw the football.
One sneaky thing that we haven't talked about, you and I, very much, but when you review the video of these first 3 games, the Chiefs right now are one of the best tackling teams in the league. I know it sounds elementary in junior high football, but this is a time in the age of the NFL where tackling is at a premium. Think about it. You don't do live tackling really much at all during training camp or outside of the preseason games. This Chiefs team has been able to make tackles. We saw it last week with Drew Tranquill. They will have to do it tonight because I really think the Jets will try to replicate what they did against the Bills. And you mentioned it. One of the biggest things they did, they went over a buck in rushing with Breece Hall. They have got to establish him and try to get chunk plays out of him and keep the Chiefs off the field.
Well, and you mentioned it. Fortunately, the Chiefs defense has been among the best in the NFL this season. And for more on the performance of this Chiefs defense so far this year through 3 games, I caught up with Kimmy Checks from NFL Network earlier this week.
All right, we're joined now by one of our favorite people. It's Kimmy Checks from NFL Network. Of course, Kimmy does all of our sideline preseason TV stuff as well. And Kimmy, I want to ask you about this Chiefs defense, which has been outstanding through 3 games. They've only allowed 3 offensive touchdowns going into Week 4 here. Just before we jump into the specifics, I'm curious for your overall thoughts on how this defense has performed this season.
Well, first, let me say you're one of my favorite people. I'm so excited to be back with you. Preseason is literally my favorite time of year because we get to hang out. But this preseason, when we were talking about this 2023 squad, you were the one who've been thumping, your chest all preseason long saying this defense is going to be really, really good. And we saw bits and pieces of it in the preseason, but obviously there were some question marks on when Chris Jones would return and what the squad would fully look like. But from what we've seen, 3 games in, and I'm sure what we'll see, now going against the Jets is this team, though they're incredibly young on the defensive side, they're all returning with a new kind of reinvigorated sense of understanding what Spags is trying to do. And when we talked to a lot of the guys this preseason, they had said, that sophomore season for us, right? The second year in this defense, that's when things really start to click because it's really tough to kind of take it all on and understand all the nuances and the bits and pieces. But now that they've been together for a while and they're kind of understanding it more, you've seen that translated on the football field. And it's really interesting when we talk about the Chiefs at the NFL Network and on Total Access, we're looking at this matchup against the Jets, right? And I think all of us have an expectation that Kansas City is going to really dominate both sides of the ball. But now, as much as people like to talk about the Chiefs and how great the offense is, people at work at the network are starting to say those same compliments of the defense. So it's no longer as one-sided of a conversation or as one-sided of just focusing in on what Chris Jones can do. It's now more so holistic of the entire defense and seeing them get that respect on a national scale. That's what's going to help take us to the next level and hope to get us back-to-back Super Bowl championships.
Yeah, and that's really exciting. Notice how Kimmy says us when referring to the Chiefs. When you're watching Kimmy on NFL Network.
I'm so biased.
She might not say it publicly, but she is a gigantic Chiefs fan, so just know that. And yeah, you and I in July were talking about how this might be the most talented defense that Patrick Mahomes has ever had, which is very exciting considering what we know Patrick can do. You mentioned a little bit about how you were feeling this kind of in the preseason and thinking this group could be special. Was there anything during maybe like our production meetings with players or any of your meetings with individuals throughout the organization that made you think this defense could be special this year?
I think just how selfless the guys were when we did talk to them. And there was never a conversation of I. It was always like we. It was always we as a defense, we as a team, we under the leadership of Coach Spags. And I think that's when you start to understand the differences, because I think other organizations, and the way that they're run, there's individual superstars who know that and they sit in that power, and that's not a bad thing, but that's not the DNA of this team. So, even when we were, talking to players and we had some time with Spags in the preseason, I had asked him a question like, are there any guys that really stick out to you or guys who spend extra time with you or come into your office that have really impressed you? And I don't even know if you remember this. He listed off like basically the entire starters for the entire defense, right? Guys like Trent McDuffie and George Karlaftis. But I mean, he went so deep into the weeds of all of these guys. And that's when you kind of realize like, holy cow, he doesn't just have one guy that comes top of mind. When these guys are talking to us, it's not just one teammate that they point to that they say is great. They rattle off 15 different names. And then you realize like, holy cow, they are a really good unit and they have this really incredible cohesion. And, we could look at film all day long and you can see that. You can see them gelling together and understanding that like they all understand how each other's brains work. So on the football field, they know how, to cover, they know, how to back up each other in instances where maybe someone has a blown coverage or when somebody's, in a spot they shouldn't be. Like, it seems like they're just in complete lockstep and in sync with each other. And then that translates and helps get them huge wins and huge stops.
Yeah, I remember that conversation with Spags, and it was hilarious because he was like, well, Trent McDuffie.
Names everybody.
Yeah, big things from him. Jalen Watson, Joshua Williams, Chris Jones. Like, it would just go on and on. And
you're like, okay, who else? And he's like, and Willie and Leo. And you're like, oh, so the entire team. This is great.
Well, speaking of individual players, my last question for you. This Jets offense has struggled this year, but as Spags said earlier this week, it's truly any given Sunday. The defense has to be ready to play this offense, even though they have struggled through 3 games this season. Who's a player or two that you're excited to watch on Sunday night against the Jets?
Oh, I'm really impressed and excited about our safeties this season. I think that's been something that, Spags and kind of everyone has had their eyes on. But, also just looking at our linebackers and looking at how dominant they are and the leadership role that they have. Like, we talked to Willie, we talked to Nick Bolton during the preseason. I think those guys really help set the tone and the tempo for the defense and then move that forward. So if you look at our line, like, I think we have one of the best D lines in football. And I think, for Zach Wilson and this Jets team that is struggling, I think when they see guys like Chris Jones licking their chops to try to get to their quarterback, but then they see our linebackers, that's a very, very, very tough test. And while they have Garrett Wilson and, some of those great offensive weapons, it's going to be very hard for them to get through us. And I think regardless of how they try to attack us offensively, either through the run or through the air, baby cameo in the background here making noise, yelling for her Kansas City Chiefs from 2 rooms over. That's what's really going to be the difference maker. And I think those guys are going to show out and I think have a feel good moment, on Sunday Night Football in prime time to let everybody know the Chiefs are here. There's no, slump. There's no anything. Let's not look back to week 1. We're here. We're dominant and we can get it done defensively.
Yeah, I think pointing out the linebacker core is a great point because look at last week against Chicago. The Chiefs are missing maybe their second best defensive player in Nick Bolton. Put Drew Tranquill in that role. They don't miss a beat. Says everything about the depth on this team.
And Drew's been great, right? Like we knew how great he was with the Chargers. And it's funny, like coming in that same division and now joining this team. That was another guy that Spags had said he adjusted immediately. And that's kind of speaks to his veteran presence. But he's been phenomenal. And I'm really excited to kind of learn more about him and get some time with him, hopefully next preseason, so we can dig into it and hear all the reasons why he loves Kansas City.
Yeah, this defense has been so much fun to watch, really, at all 3 levels so far this season. Hopefully, they can keep it going on Sunday Night Football. Kimmy, you're the absolute best. Thanks for joining us.
You're the best. Go Chiefs, as always. Chiefs Kingdom forever.
All right, great stuff there from Kimmy Checks. I want to get your thoughts on the defense so far as well because they've just been phenomenal here through 3 games.
But I think the NFL is now noticing base subjects, right? The math, science, and English languages, if you will, of defense, scoring defense, third down, red zone. And the Chiefs right now are top 5 in all 3 of those categories. It's been a long time, Matt, since the Chiefs have been in this neighborhood. The fact, too, that they're getting impact play from 3 levels, all 3 levels are participating here. The other thing is the versatility is really showing up. You're seeing it on the defensive guys moving inside and outside. All of them can do it. Mike Dana is maybe the most underrated guy in this whole team. But the DBs and Trent McDuffie being the highest rated corner, you put it in your 5 things to know. And people need to make sure you read that every week. But the fact that he's the highest rated corner in the league is on the Chiefs team. People are taking notice, but they need to do it again tonight in front of this stage.
Now, we got the inactives here in just a moment. A few quick announcements before we go over those. We have a new promo code for the Pro Shop this week. So if you watched last week, every week now we're going to have a new discount code. It's a big deal. We've made it now with this. The promo code this week is Footballin' on a Budget. Footballin' on a budget.
Footballin' on a budget.
Footballin' on a budget. If you go to the Pro Shop at GEHA Field at Arrowhead Stadium, you're going to get 10% off your purchase if you say Footballin' on a budget. Now
do we do a turn here? Do we go
like arms to like this? Yeah. There are some rules and some parameters around this. The offer is not valid on game day or the day before and cannot be stacked with other discounts. It's in-store only, so not online, just at the Pro Shop at GEHA Field at Arrowhead Stadium. It excludes memorabilia, Oakleys, Ray-Bans, and sale items, but all the stuff you see us wearing on our shows all week long, you'll get 10% off from the Pro Shop. So Footballin' on a budget. One more quick announcement. Morgan Wallen is bringing One Night at a Time 2024 to GEHA Field at Arrowhead. Sign up for advanced registration now at morganwallen.com for a chance to get a pre-sale code for the shows on August 1st and August 2nd, 2024.
And we
have commercials, man. Yeah.
Well, have we become the epicenter of concerts, too?
Pretty cool, right? Beyonce's going on right now.
Right now, Beyonce's like 2 worlds are colliding here. And then we have concert performers that just come to our games. They just show up in suites, and people go nuts. I mean, what planet are we on here, man?
Hey, it's pretty cool.
It's awesome.
All right, we just got the inactives for tonight's game. No real surprises here. We kind of knew who was not going to play already. You can take a look right there. Some players we knew about already. Nick Bolton, not going to play here tonight for the second straight week with that ankle injury. Of course, a bummer not having Nick, but Drew Tranquill came in and played really well last week.
Yeah, and he's going to do it again tonight. I really look for the Chiefs to continue to mix and match their defenses. We've seen a lot of 3 safety, sometimes 4 safety look.
Yeah.
But what's key here is that Drew Tranquill has to be the traffic cop of all of that, the so-called green dot. Nick Bolton does a fabulous job of it and is such an impactful player, but for Tranquill to take it seamlessly last week, it's hard to do. Sometimes it's easier to do it on the road than it is at home because of the crowd noise is less. But still, the fact that he has to coordinate. This is a very complicated and very creative Chiefs defense, but someone has to be the traffic cop in there, to give you a New York City reference, and Tranquill's perfect at doing that.
He's awesome, isn't he?
What a pickup, and he's such a smart,
yeah,
awesome dude, so articulate.
The ultimate luxury signing for the Chiefs, and it's already paying off here in week 4. We're also not going to have Jalen Watson at corner here tonight. He has a shoulder strain, popped up on the injury report on Thursday. Nick Jones is active, though, for the Chiefs. We'll see what Nick Jones can do here tonight.
So I'm at the hotel. I said, dude, you ready? He was just like, let's go.
Good for him.
Let's go. But we saw Nick emerge. You and I saw him even in rookie minicamp all the way back in May. And then we thought, well, who is this guy? 7th-round pick. And then he just kept rolling. So tonight, hopefully on this stage, Nick Jones can let the world know who he is.
Now, looking at the Jets, they're pretty healthy overall, outside of obviously the Aaron Rodgers injury. The one significant player not going to play here tonight is safety Tony Adams with a hamstring injury, missing his 2nd straight game. He's one of their starting safeties. Their defense is really good, but maybe a bit thin here in the secondary.
They got depth, though, at safety. Adrian Amos is back there. We mentioned Jordan Whitehead. Amos is a veteran, a long-time Chicago Bear, so I don't think they'll miss. I mean, they could use Adams, but they still got enough firepower back there. Wes Schweiger will be out with a concussion. He's been their 5th offensive lineman, kind of, so that hurts them at depth there. They had to elevate an offensive lineman. So although it could be a factor if they have any injuries in the offensive line for the Jets.
That's a tongue twister of a name, isn't it?
And you know what? Here's what's interesting, because Drew Tranquill talked about it. That was he beat him in chess. Made that the NFL chess tournament.
Chess.com.
And he beat Wes Schweiger. I nailed Wes Schweiger. So
Amazing.
Way to go, Drew. You've already got one win for us tonight.
Well, we'll wrap up our show with this. Coach Spagnuolo said something earlier this week that really kind of stuck with me. He said the rhetoric and the messaging all week long from him to the locker room was that it doesn't matter what the storylines are, what the records are, or what the stats are. Any team in the NFL can beat any other team on any given Sunday. The Chiefs know that. They knew that last week against Chicago. They took care of business. I'm confident Kansas City has the right attitude for this game here tonight. For Mitch Holthus, I'm Matt McMullen. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. Let's go get a victory.